All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us today for a discussion on warehouse technology, transforming operations from nightmare to nerve center. My name is Lauren Martin. I am a senior marketing coordinator here at Innovactive and will be acting as your moderator for today's webinar. Just a few housekeeping items before we jump in. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please submit those into the Q&A box and we'll address as many as possible at the end of the webcast. In the event that we aren't able to get to your question, we will follow up with you directly. Also, this webinar will be recorded and all attendees will receive a copy of that recording within the next day or so. Without further ado, I'd like to kick us off by introducing our speaker for today, Innovactive's Chief Supply Chain Evangelist, Richard Sandel. Richard partners with industry leaders to transform their warehouse operations by empowering teams with technology and best practices to create positive change. Prior to joining Innovactive, Richard worked for Shell, focusing on both downstream and upstream operations. At Shell, he led the successful deployment of their global standard SAP system in the lubricants business across 37 countries and was later responsible for leading operational excellence initiatives in 200 MRO warehouses worldwide. Richard, welcome to today's webinar.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Lauren, and welcome everybody, and thanks very much for joining. I really hope you find it a useful session this afternoon.
Awesome. So I just want to take a look at the agenda really quick here to kind of show what we have planned for today. We'll start off by looking at the industry trends that we see challenging warehousing. We'll go into what that nightmare scenario looks like for warehousing, and then we'll discuss some of the great technologies out there that can help organizations address those challenges. We're also excited to share a short video highlighting some real practical examples of how warehouse technology can help. And then, of course, we'll go into the Q&A session at the end. So let's get things rolling. So Richard, we've used a rather emotive title for today's webinar when we talk about transforming operations from nightmare to nerve center. Let's start with the nightmare part. What are you seeing as the main challenges for warehousing, and is it really as bad as a nightmare?
Yeah, sure. I agree. It's quite a dramatic title, but I wanted to emphasize that the warehouse world is changing very quickly. Warehousing has always had an important role in the end-to-end supply chain, holding inventory to buffer against changes in customer demand, and also as a source of service to your customers. But in recent years, we're seeing a range of pressures affecting the supply chain and warehousing in particular. So let's take a look at some of those challenges. A recent report from Bain, the management consultants, indicated that consumer goods companies can expect a 30% reduction in margins by 2030. And consumer goods companies are faced by tremendous pressures. Consumers are evolving very quickly. They're seeking greater convenience, more sustainable goods, greater transparency, and traceability. And retailers are having to evolve quickly as well. They're grappling with surging growth in e-commerce, the prevalence of everyday value. And as a result, they're fiercely negotiating with manufacturers to maintain already razor-thin margins. And the results of all this is that supply chains are becoming more complex. Companies are struggling with more channels to market, shorter lead times, and also increase product range. And the figures for Bain, they actually show that supply chain is so important. 50% of the margin loss over the next 10 years is going to come from rising supply chain costs. And I think it's important to emphasize it's not just consumer goods and retail that are faced by pressures. In Innovactive, we do a lot of work in asset-intensive industries like oil and gas and mining and utilities. And we're seeing similar trends for increasing product range and also the demand for shorter lead times. So companies need to address these challenges, and Bain highlighted that a 5 to 10% margin improvement can come from improvements in the supply chain. And the sorts of things that we're seeing there would be improvement in overall equipment effectiveness, which is basically running your production lines more efficiently and reducing downtime, improving forecast accuracy, which is a big challenge for many companies, shortening the life cycle for new products. And the one way to do that is to work more closely with suppliers. And I think generally supplier collaboration comes out as a big theme in terms of being able to reduce lead times in the marketplace. So it's not one company that can make the changes themselves. I think it's end-to-end supply chain collaboration that is really going to help.
Right. And so you've highlighted the specific challenge on the supply chain and the warehouses, but isn't it just a case of acquiring more warehouse space and labor to meet the new demands that you've described?
Yeah, I would agree that increasing resources can help, but there are real challenges on the ground when it comes to resources, as we show on the next slide. So we do a lot of work in the US, Canada, UK and Australia in particular. And one of the things that we're seeing is a big issue around labour shortages, in particular drivers and warehouse staff. Just to give you some examples, US employment in third-party logistics has doubled over the last 10 years. And despite all those great videos that you see on YouTube showing robots in warehouses doing the picking, e-commerce warehouses are still very labor intensive, and Amazon themselves do massive hiring in the run up to the holiday season, as this headline 100,000 Amazon hires indicates. The other big challenge that we're seeing is a shortage of warehouse space. So again, using US data, the vacancy rates at the moment are less than 5%, which means many companies are finding it hard to find space. And then on top of all this, e-commerce has led to a 7.6% reduction in warehouse productivity. If you imagine it, it's very labor intensive to pick small consumer orders. So the bottom line here, I think it's a very challenging environment for companies in the warehousing space.
Well, we can definitely see from all this that supply chains are being challenged on both the demand side and the supply side, and it might rightly be described as a nightmare scenario. We see customers becoming more demanding, and resources like warehouse space and labor are in short supply. So how is the market responding to those changes?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really going to be the focus of the remainder of the webinar today. We're going to take a deeper look at two areas. Firstly, we'll look at physical changes going on in warehousing. And secondly, we'll take a look at technology changes going on, both in supply chain and in particular, we'll look at warehousing technology. So this is quite an interesting slide looking at, I think, some of the trends that are going on in warehouse design. And we actually identify 5 big trends here. The first one is increasing footprint, which basically means warehouses are becoming bigger. And a lot of that is driven by e-commerce. So a typical e-commerce warehouse would be 3 times bigger than a traditional warehouse. The reasons for that is that the product range is a lot greater, and also you've got a lot of labor intensive picking going on of those consumer orders. And if you've got more people in the warehouse, then you need more ancillary space, so car parking and canteen. So the warehouse footprint's becoming bigger, they're also getting higher. And as companies build upwards really to utilize the footprint more effectively and keep operating costs and land costs to a minimum. So when they build up, obviously they have to make better use of that height, so that you'll see things like mezzanine floors, pick towers, and narrow aisle racking to get the best utilization. The third trend we see is increasing automation, and that's to overcome some of those issues that we talked about earlier, in particular labor shortages. Technology includes basic technology, may include things like conveyors, it may include ASRS systems, which have been around for a while, and you'll see those moving full pallets of product in particular from the production line into the finished goods warehouse, and then loading and unloading of vehicles, rather than using forklift truck moving 1 pallet at a time, mass unloading. So you'll have material handling equipment that can move, say, 20 pallets at one time. And the other trend we see is to more eco-friendly warehouses, and that's driven by the need to be more energy efficient, and also society demanding that we move to a low carbon future. So you'll see things like solar panels on roofs, rainwater harvesting, and skylights to allow in more natural light, and that's obviously to reduce electricity consumption. And then the final trend that we see is warehouses being built closer to cities. So we talked about the demand for reduced lead time. So if you're going to get product to customers in the space of 2 hours, then you actually need to be very close to them. So we're seeing interesting designs like multi-story warehouses and even conversion of retail shopping malls into warehouses rather than their old retailing purpose.
Yeah, so you're saying warehouses, they're getting larger and higher with more automation, which is going to help companies tackle these challenges. Can you go into some of the technology trends that you're seeing in the supply chain and warehousing?
Yeah, for sure. So let's take a look first at the wider supply chain, and then we'll go into a little bit more detail on the warehousing side. So this is, there's quite a lot on this diagram. We're actually going to start over on the right-hand side, which is the customer. I think all good supply chains should start really with the customer in mind. And consumer goods companies use this concept of the perfect order, but it's applicable to work orders if you're working in a MRO environment as well. So what does the customer need? They need the right products, the right quantity, the right packaging. They want it in the right condition and arriving at the right place at the right time. And then finally, it's getting all the right documentation to them, which might include the bill of lading and then the invoice. So that all sounds very simple, but it's not as easy as that. I think, and that's really what the whole supply chain is organized around. So then if we go over to the left-hand side, and we'll see all the different activities in the supply chain. So we typically start with a sales and operational planning process. You'll see this in a lot of consumer goods companies, but also in pharma. And it's really about trying to forecast the demand. You know, what are consumers going to need, say, over the next year, often at the SKU level. And then you're designing your whole supply chain around that, including procurement, production, and warehousing. The really big challenge is getting that forecast right. Obviously, ultimately, forecasts are never completely accurate. And one of the big trends that we're seeing now is companies are kind of moving away from longer term planning to this concept called demand sensing, which is taking a much more short term view of the supply chain, basing your estimates on actual customer orders in the pipeline and being able to respond more quickly. So you need an agile supply chain to make that work. On the procurement side, there obviously is always a big drive to reduce costs. A lot of that comes through working more closely with your supplier base. And one of the technologies we see being used increasingly is called robotic process automation, which is really around automating routine processes, but a little bit different maybe from what's happened in the past, where it was more based on computers, but now you've got artificial intelligence, machine learning being used as part of that process. So we see it being used for processing of invoices, three-way matching, and really sort of applying intelligence to quite routine processes, but being able to speed them up. Then on the production side, we're seeing a move towards product traceability. So you'll have heard of this sort of being able to trace consumer goods from the farmer all the way through to the consumer's plate. And blockchain is the technology that's being used increasingly to do that. It's not just used for that. Actually, we're seeing it being used for luxury products as well. So they have a big issue with fakes in the supply chain. So being able to check the integrity of product at each stage in the supply chain is becoming increasingly important. We talked about robots already, so I won't mention those again, but definitely being used more in warehousing. And then on the transport side, there's a big issue with shortage of labor. And I heard some data from the UK this week, actually, where I'm based. We're short of actually 90,000 heavy goods vehicle drivers at the moment. So it really is a big issue. And they're talking about shortages of goods already on the shelves. And obviously everyone's getting concerned now around Christmas as well.
Yeah, wow. And you know, some of the technologies shown here are quite advanced, and companies will be at different points in their technology journey. So how should companies ensure that they're selecting the right technology for where they are in their operations?
Yeah, I think that it's a really good point. I think it is about choosing the right technology, given the complexity and the maturity of your own operation. And we would say always start really with the business problem that you're trying to solve. Don't start with the technology. So let's take a look at warehousing in a little bit more detail. So what we're trying to say here on this slide is, you know, not all warehouses are the same. So it is about choosing appropriate technology based on the type of warehousing. We've shown 4 types of warehousing here. I'm sure there's different ways of categorizing, but what we try to show here is the kind of level of technology sophistication that you need will vary depending on the size of that warehouse. So on the left-hand side, we've got an MRO warehouse, which is maintenance, repairs and operations. So that's a spare parts facility. And then we go to factory raw material, factory finished goods to regional distribution center. And those warehouses will vary. So, you know, the MRO warehouse tends to be quite small, maybe 5,000 square feet. Most companies will have put those on their ERP system, so you've got basic control in terms of goods receipts, goods issues, but often the processes in the warehouse will remain paper-based. No warehouse management system is fairly typical. Then on the raw material side, those warehouses will tend to be bigger, probably using barcode scanning, maybe not having a warehouse management system if the number of SKUs is fairly small. But then we move over to the finished goods side and the regional distribution center. Obviously, they're going to be a lot bigger. You're definitely going to have barcode scanning, almost certainly in those types of operations. You'll need a warehouse management system to give you bin level control, and you'll have a lot more technology to kind of speed up the process and drive productivity.
So you're saying even the smallest warehouses can benefit from new technology?
Yeah, exactly. You know, small warehouses, there are some great technologies out there, and Innovactive, we do a lot of work with companies in the MRO space. So this will be your kind of asset intensive industries like oil and gas, mining, utilities, chemicals, and a lot of those companies are using fairly basic processes. So there's huge opportunities for them to improve the efficiency of the warehouse operation. We can take a closer look at, we call it one of the foundation technologies for warehousing, which is, you know, scanning and auto identification, and just kind of follow the history of that a little bit on the next slide. So this is the evolution of scanning technology. So we start down at the bottom left-hand corner. So this would be a lot of warehouses, as I mentioned earlier, are still operating on paper-based processes, and they're quite inefficient. The big problems you'll get not only on the productivity side, but inventory accuracy problems. You know, you can't read people's handwriting. The wrong information gets input into the ERP system, and that's where the problems start. The next stage in the evolution, we've called it traditional RF scanners. We're starting to, you know, those have been used. It's not recent technology. It's been used for the last 20 years, certainly in some industry sectors. And those were a big step forward in terms of driving improvements in productivity, connected with auto ID, so barcode scanning, enable companies to improve their inventory accuracy. The big challenge with those devices was that they were quite difficult to change. They were hard coded, so even doing simple changes like putting on another field was quite would probably be a change request with IT and would take some time to do it. The next stage in the evolution we're showing here is modern smart devices. So we do a lot of work with this company Cognex. This is a ruggedized case, and inside that case is a smartphone, just like the ones you use. So it could be an Android, it could be an iOS device, and we're going to show a short video in a minute to kind of show how that's better than the older scanners. So I won't say too much here, but you can see the screen's a lot bigger and it's very easy to do changes. And then kind of the next stage of the evolution is hands-free, and that's using smart glasses from companies like Google and Microsoft. You can just kind of look at the barcode and it gets scanned automatically. So those are definitely coming, I think, particularly in high volume warehouses. Obviously, the hardware alone is not enough to provide you with a robust and flexible warehouse solution. The mobile solution is a critical component. Sorry, the mobile software is a critical component which connects the physical warehouse operation with the back-end, the ERP system. And this is the market where Innovactive focus with our connected worker solutions. And our product for warehousing is called M-Inventory. And I wanted to just show you a short video. It's only going to last for about 4 minutes, which shows you kind of the highlights and the benefits of having a modern mobile solution.
Meet Lily, a warehouse operator at a local storage facility. Lily is a willing worker and loves her job, although she does face challenges daily when trying to complete her work. Some of those challenges are due to the fact that all warehouse processes today are paper-based, which mean handwritten notes and instructions, which can be sometimes difficult to read. A couple of times a day, she has to walk to the admin office with packing lists, pick sheets, and cycle count paperwork for someone else to process the transaction on a desktop in SAP. She is constantly interrupted from her daily work schedule by frequent office admin staff calling her to check on the paperwork, along with calls from the warehouse manager seeking updates on progress. Her boss is complaining about inventory accuracy, which is down by 10%. And Lily now has to stop all tasks at hand to spend time looking for goods, slowing down picking of critical customer orders. We will now see how M-Inventory solves the challenges Lily faces on a daily basis. Here I have the M-Inventory app on my iPhone, and it's directly connected to SAP. What you see here is the main menu, which shows all the warehouse activities that are supported, including goods receipt, picking, goods issue, cycle counting, and a lot more. Let's take a closer look at goods receipt to see how quick and easy it is to process a supplier delivery of materials in SAP. The first supplier vehicle of the day arrives at the warehouse and the driver gives Lily the packing list, showing all the materials coming in. Lily taps on goods receipt and scans the purchase order number barcode on the packing list. This immediately brings up the correct purchase order on the device. If there is no barcode on the packing list, she can use the optical character recognition (OCR) to scan PO numbers and bring up the correct purchase order. Lily physically checks the product and quantity before confirming the actual quantity on the mobile device. Once all the items are received, Lily uses the camera to scan the packing list and store that back into SAP or a document management system. Here is how I use OCR to capture data. Lily then signs on the screen to confirm that she has followed the process and posts the goods receipt to SAP. She can then select and print the required number of labels for the materials. M-Inventory supports printing to wireless printers connected by Bluetooth or to static printers in the warehouse. Labels are then applied to materials, which are then ready for a put-away process. That's how easy it is. M-Inventory comes bundled with Innovactive's patented no-code platform called RACE. RACE stands for Rapid Application Configuration Engine, which enables us to configure the solution to meet your exact warehouse processes without the need to tweak or write new code. Screens can be easily personalized to meet the user roles and authorizations flowing in from SAP. So if Lily only works on goods receipt, we would then turn off all other warehouse activities through RACE. The flexibility provided by RACE is a huge step forward from older RF scanner solutions, which would connect back to a lot of static code, where even adding or removing a field from the scanner screen involves a change request to IT. The M-Inventory solution is now fully implemented in Lily's warehouse, and she and her boss are experiencing the benefits firsthand. She no longer spends time walking to the office to process transactions in SAP. The warehouse manager has real-time visibility of operations and can take immediate action if he spots operational inefficiencies. Inventory accuracy is now running at greater than 99%. Goods receipt time has been reduced by 50% and time to pick orders by 30%. On-time delivery of customer orders has also increased as outbound vehicles are now dispatched at their allocated times. A modern mobile solution integrated with SAP and auto-identification technologies will drive improvements in warehouse productivity, inventory accuracy, working capital, and customer service. It's time to take another look at your warehouse operations and ensure you're using the best tools for the job. Head on over to our website to learn more.
Richard, you want to give a recap?
Oh yeah,
there?
sorry, my internet was flickering a little bit. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I mean the video hopefully is kind of giving you an indication of why a modern mobile solution is different from the older scanners. You're able to tap into all of the great features that you would get on a modern smart device. You know, the camera, the video, the GPS tracking, and all of those technologies can be used to improve your warehouse processes. So that's the end of the presentation. I'll hand back to Laura now for Q&A.
All right. Thanks, Richard. Yeah, I am seeing a couple questions come through, so let's go ahead and jump in. First question that I'm seeing asks, what other new technologies are you seeing companies use in warehouses?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in consumer goods and retail, which are two sectors that are really faced by this challenge of labour shortages and the need to pick smaller orders, I think the goods to picker systems, where the picker is working in a fixed location and the goods are brought to them often by a robot. So, you know, you'll see that in the Amazon facilities. That's certainly one of the big trends, but other companies are also using them. And then drones. I mean, we've seen examples of companies using drones in the mining sector where they need to do an inventory count of minerals ore. So they fly the drone over and it does the calculation of the actual volume, and it's a lot quicker than having someone walk around with a piece of paper.
Okay. Next question, what backend ERP systems does M-Inventory integrate with?
Yeah, we integrate with all of the different SAP warehouse options, so inventory management, warehouse management, and extended warehouse management. And we can support both ECC6 and also S/4HANA, which is obviously the direction that a lot of companies are going in. So that really means we're able to cover the full range of warehouse types that you saw on the earlier slide, whether it be an MRO warehouse, raw materials, or finished goods.
Okay. What would be the timeline for implementing a mobile solution in warehouses?
Yeah, around about 12 to 16 weeks, depending on the size and complexity of the operation, I would say. And that involves the technical setup of our solution in our customers' ERP environment, the design workshops, the configuration of the solution to meet your exact business process, and the testing. And I think one important element of our solution, which was actually mentioned in the video, is this rapid app configuration engine, which is our low code, no code platform. And that allows companies to overcome the challenge of scalability, which plagued a lot of earlier mobile implementations. So if you had a hard coded solution, it was very difficult to do changes. So with Race, we can put new fields on the mobile screen in less than a minute. So it really gives you a lot of flexibility.
Okay. And last question that we have time for. You mentioned that M-Inventory is a native app. What's the benefit over a web-based app?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to going to give a non-technical answer to that because I'm more from the business side. But a native app is an app that's on the mobile device itself, whereas a web-based app is more of a kind of a browser-based solution. And since the native app is on the mobile device, it's a lot easier to use all of the functionality of the smart device. It also tends to be faster as well. Performance is important in a warehouse. You know, you can't expect people to wait a few seconds before they get an answer back from the ERP system. So speed of response is another big benefit of a native app as well.
All right, well, that's all the time that we have for questions today. But as I mentioned earlier, we'll be in touch shortly with a copy of the recording and to address any questions that we didn't get to. At the close of this webinar, you'll be directed to a short survey as well, where we'd love to get your feedback about the presentation, hear about anything that you'd like to see in the future, etc. So please take a few moments to fill that out if you can. For more information on how Innovaptive supports an integrated value chain with our Connected Worker platform, please reach out to us using the information on the screen, and we can either provide more resources or schedule a demo for you. That wraps up today's discussion. Thank you so much, Richard, for your presentation, and thank you all for spending some time with us. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.